Nikita always considered himself a person who could not be forced to follow someone else's rules. He walked through a life with the conviction that everything can be controlled if you carefully calculate the consequences. He was 30 and was engaged in consulting. Strategies, numbers, reports, all this creates the illusion that you are managing chess. But there are things that do not fit into Excel tables. For example, love. Or what he himself said to call love. Надя Эрперт in which life у них підстедла. He met for at a client's corporate party, in one of the Moscow lofts, where it smelled of expensive wine and other people's ambitions. She came with colleagues, but at some point she was left alone, and he came up to offer her a glass. It was a classic move, one of those that always works. I saw you at the bar. You look like you hate these tricks. She smiled. The smile was calm, a little tired, and it immediately read, she understood what he was doing. And yet she did not leave. Maybe because I really don't like TRM, she said. Then you and I already have something in common, Nikita answered. It was funny and a little impudent. But it worked. They spent an evening together, and then another. Everything spun so quickly that he almost did not notice how he began to check each's phone every day in anticipation of her messages. He told himself that this was just a hobby, a temporary weakness. He already had a girlfriend, Irina. Warm, reliable, too predictable. 3 years of relationship, common renovation, giant plans. All this seemed to him more like a project than feelings. And then one night, when Irina was sleeping in the next room, he was lying in the kitchen and texting Nadia. Let's go somewhere tomorrow for a couple of days. Just you and me, she wrote. He looked at the sleeping Irina and realized that he would agree. And that he could no longer stop. They went to St. Petersburg. Nikita had thought of everything. He would calculate it perfectly. The trip, the bills, the alibi. He knew that he was doing something nasty, but inside he was burning with desire. With Nadia it was different. With her he felt the excitement, like in childhood, when he would sneak into abandoned houses. The genius of HDS moves, as he called them to himself, was in the details. He had forwarded himself letters about the business trip in advance, bought souvenirs for Irina, made notes in the corporate calendar. He even agreed with a colleague so that he would confirm each's version if necessary. Nikita was looking forward to how he would calmly return home as if nothing had happened. In St. Petersburg, they rented a room in a Baltic hotel with a view of the canal. He fell asleep next to Nadia and thought that, probably, for the first time in a long time he was happy. But deep down he knew, it was temporary. On the third day he woke up from her gaze. Nadia was sitting on the edge of the bed and looking at him as if she was trying to see which's real face under which's mask. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? She asked suddenly. Of course not, he said, trying to speak calmly. She nodded. There was a mixture of regret and something else in her eyes. You're lying to her, Nikita. You're lying so much that you believe yourself. This phrase stuck in which's head. He knew that Nadia was right. But he was sure, he had everything under control. Returning home, the first thing he did was hide the gifts and souvenirs to give them to Irina later from her business trip. He went into the bedroom, washed each's face and looked in the mirror. Each's face looked tired. But in the depths of the reflection he saw another person, the one he was becoming. Everything went wrong when Irina found each's bank statement. He himself had forgotten to delete the hotel payment notification. When he returned from work that evening, she was sitting at the table with her phone in her hand. Nikita, she said evenly, without hysteria. Is there anything you want to tell me? He froze. A second, 2, 3. He realized that this was the very moment when everything could collapse with one word. It's not what you think, he said dully. Just a business trip. Colleagues wanted to celebrate a deal. A deal? She asked again. In a luxury room. With a romantic dinner. She laid out the photos in front of him, the hotel website, the booking details, the map. Everything he had thought was a flawless plan turned into evidence. He remembered Nadia, for look. You lie so much that you even believed a years after. He realized that he had lost. But then, at the most desperate moment, Kichi's last, brilliant move was born. He closed each eyes and paused to collect each thoughts. And then he said, "Okay. It happened. But you don't know the whole truth." She was silent. "Nadia, she's my ex. We met by chance. She has problems. Very serious ones. She begged me to help her because she had no one else to turn to. I just rented a room so she could hide from her husband. Tfeira abusive, you know." He saw Irina wavering. He spoke quietly, convincingly. He knew what strings to touch, her compassion, her fear that he would leave her if she didn't believe. "Do you really think I could betray you for the sake of," he spread beachless hands. "For the sake of a casual affair. It was all theatre to help a person." He sighed and looked into her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you right, Roy. I was afraid you wouldn't understand." She looked at him for a long time. For a very long time. And then, she closed her laptop. "I don't know what to think," she said quietly. "I'm tired, Nikita. Let's talk tomorrow." When she went into the bedroom, he sat down in the kitchen. Lich's heart was pounding. This move was risky, but he had time. Time to figure out how to completely cover Ichi's tracks. He poured himself some whiskey and took a big sip. He felt like a winner and a loser at the same time. The next day, Irina barely looked him in the eye. It was as if she had distanced herself to some safe distance. Ichi's brilliant move had only have worked. She hadn't kicked him out, but she hadn't fully believed him either. And Nadia was calling more and more often. She didn't need Ichi's excuse, but she was drawn to him with some frightening force. He himself didn't understand what he wanted, to save what he had with Irina, or to completely destroy it for Nadezhda's sake. One evening he decided to end it all. He dialed Nadia's number. "We have to stop this," he said. "Are you sure?" Her voice was strangely calm. "Yes." She sighed. "Then maybe you should know one more truth." "Which one?" "I know you are Irina." He felt everything around him become shaky. "What?" "We crossed paths. And I'm afraid she has reasons to know that you're lying." "What are you talking about?" "She found me herself. Whether by chance or not, I don't know. But she understands everything. She's just waiting for the moment to leave." She left without looking back. He was left alone. With Ichi's strategies, alibis, and an empty apartment. And for the first time he realized that it was impossible to control everything. "I'm leaving," she said calmly. "Nadia was right. And you proved it years off." He wanted to say something. To justify himself. To ask for forgiveness. But there were no words. "You're too smart, Nikita. And too cowardly to admit it to yourself." Your brilliant move is just an attempt not to look guilty. But you're still guilty. When he hung up, it seemed as if Uiche's brilliant move had collapsed under its own weight. Part 7. The ending. 2 weeks had passed. Everything had become cold and mechanical. Irina hardly spoke to him. One evening, returning from work, he found her in the hallway with a suitcase. Part I. Moving. It always seemed to me that the walls of old houses absorbed everything they heard. As if the bricks and beams remembered showers, laughter, words and whispers. When I first saw this house, for some reason it occurred to me. It didn't want to be lived in. It was a summer evening when I came to inspect the purchase. The broker showed me the rooms with an absent-minded smile, the ceiling with cracks and the stairs that creaked as if complaining of fatigue. The house stood at the very edge of the forest, from which there was a smell of cold dampness even in July. The plaster on the facade was peeling, the windows looked like empty sockets. But the price was too good to refuse. Nobody lived here for about 5 years, the broker said. The owner was found dead in the bedroom. An old man. A heart. He talked about it like the weather. As if this were as much an element of the entourage as peeling paint. I nodded, trying not to show that I was uneasy. When the deal was done and I brought the things, the neighbor, a teen woman in a black headscarf, came up to me. She was holding a basket of sea buckthorn. "You're going to live in it, aren't you?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, like a whisper. "Yes," I nodded. "And why are you asking?" She looked at me with a long look. The house was reflected in her eyes, like in an old mirror. The memory here is strong. It doesn't let go. I didn't know what to say. Instead of answering, I took the basket, thanked her, and slammed the door. And already on that first evening I heard the first sound. A light creak behind the wall, as if someone had walked along the corridor, carefully stepping barefoot. I lived in the house for a little over a week when I began to notice strange things. At night, when I was half asleep, a soft hum would start behind the wall. It resembled the distant roar of the surf. But the house stood on the edge of the forest, and the nearest lake was 3 kilometers away. The hum would last for about 2 minutes, then disappear. I didn't immediately attach any significance to it. I attributed it to old wiring, drafts, a tired imagination. But then the hum turned into a whisper. It would come at about the same time, between 1 and 2 in the morning. At first it would be quiet, almost indistinguishable. As if someone was speaking very close to the wall, but the words were incomprehensible. Only a ragged RHYTHM, as if they were saying the same thing over and over again. On the fourth night, I decided to put my ear to the wall. The words became unexpectedly clear. "You won't live. You won't live. You won't live." I recoiled, my heart sank somewhere in my stomach. I sat on the floor for a long time, looking at the chipped wallpaper. I tried to convince myself that this was a dream. A hallucination. That I was just averted. The next morning I went to my neighbor. "Tell me," I asked, "did you hear anything at night?" She looked past me at the house. "I heard," she answered. "I've heard it all my life. But it's not talking to me." "To whom?" She didn't answer. She just turned round and went back to her room. Part 2. Dere. In the evening I decided to clean up the basement. There, among the boxes and old furniture, I found a wooden box locked with a rusty padlock. When I opened it this crowbar, I found several yellowed sheets of paper inside. It was the diary of the previous owner. The handwriting was large and uncertain, as if a sick person wrote. The entries were without dates, just day after day. Today I heard him again. He walks behind the wall. I know that he lives there. When I am silent, he is silent. But if I start to be afraid, he whispers. I tried to leave. But every time I came back here, he said that he would not let me go. If anyone reads this, knows this, he comes out when you stop believing in him too. On the last page, a hand that was already trembling, wrote one word, stay touch. I sat there for a long time, staring at that word. Then I crumpled the page and threw it in the trash. Something inside me told me, if I didn't leave right now, I wouldn't be able to live. But I stayed. Part 3. Graying Hour. The next night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in a chair and waited. The home had started a little earlier, at 12:30. At first it was faint, then it grew louder. The whisper burst into the room like an icy wind. You won't live. I clenched my teeth, clutching the flashlight in my hand. This time I decided to act. I slowly approached the wall and knocked. There was no answer. Then I moved the old cabinet, under which, according to my neighbor's recollections, there had once been a door to the storage room too. The wallpaper had peeled off, and I saw the outline of a solid opening. The brickwork was a different color, as if it had been installed recently. I ran my palm over the cold seam. At that moment, the home stopped. There was a dead silence. Even the forest outside the windows fell silent. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. It seemed as if someone was hiding behind the wall, waiting. I decided to set up a camera. A small old recorder that I used to use for filming interviews. I set it to record at night. I put it on a tripod and went into the bedroom. I slept badly, I twitched at every sound. The first thing in the morning I checked the recording. Most of the time, the room was in darkness. Only at 1 o'clock in the morning did the microphone pick up a familiar hum. Then the sound of footsteps appeared. Very clear. As if someone was walking barefoot on the floor. The camera did not pick up anything except an empty wall. But at some point, at 1:43, I saw a silhouette. It was translucent, faintly glowing. Tall. Human. He stood facing the wall and seemed to be stroking it with witch's palms. Then, without turning round, he bowed witch's head as if listening. And then the whisper came right into the microphone. You're here. I know. Open up. The recording stopped. The camera simply turned off. I sat with that recording all day, reviewing the footage. A feeling grew inside me that I was no longer alone. Whatever it was, I knew I could see it. Part 4. The solution. I didn't turn on the camera for several days. I lived like I was on a powder kick. I drank liters of coffee to stay awake and almost never went outside. During this time, the walls seemed to shrink, to become closer. The house was breathing. The home was repeated every night. And now I heard in it not just a whisper, but something clear. As if someone was talking to me, but I couldn't yet understand the meaning of these words. Open up. It sounded more and more often, like a request and a threat at the same time. On the 5th day, I decided, enough. I couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. When evening came, I took a crowbar, a construction flashlight and a knife. I didn't really understand why I needed a knife. Maybe to feel at least some kind of weapon in my hands. I moved the cabinet, turned on the flashlight and slowly ran my fingers over the bricks. Something flashed at the joints. I took a closer look and realized that the seams were covered with something like varnish. It was repelled freshly, evenly. As if someone had sealed this opening in our time. I drove a crowbar into the crack and pulled towards me. At first, nothing happened. Then the masonry began to crack with a weak crack. It seemed to me that at that moment the home died down. As if whatever was behind the wall was hiding in anticipation. I pulled out the first brick. A smell of dampness and cold came from the opening, so thick that goosebumps ran down my spine. Then a second brick, a third. When an opening formed, I looked inside. There was a room there. Small, without windows. The ceiling was low, covered with cobwebs. In the center stood a narrow iron bed, on which lay an oblong object wrapped in grey cloth. I could not look away. Everything inside me tinted with a premonition that this was the source of everything. The source of the whispers, the footsteps, the hums. And now I was too close to retreat. I returned to the hallway, sat down on the floor and tried to catch my breath. The home was back. But this time there was something different about it. It was louder, heavier. Like someone was pounding a huge drum in the dark. I stood up. I knew that if I didn't find out what was inside the room, it would haunt me for the rest of my life. With the flashlight in one hand and the knife in the other, I stepped through the doorway. Part V, inside. The cold in the room was thick as fuck. It became harder to breathe. The beam of the flashlight trembled in my hand, sliding along the walls. There was no furniture here except for the bed. The floor was littered with old yellowed newspapers and scraps of fabric. I slowly approached the bed. The grey canvas lay flat, without folds. As if someone had just laid it out carefully. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to collect my thoughts. I thought that if I took off the blanket, everything would change. There would be no turning back. I reached out and grabbed the edge. "Don't do this," someone whispered behind me. I turned round abruptly, the knife in my hand describing an arc in the air. But there was no one behind me. Then I realized the voice was in my head. I turned to the bed and tore off the sheet. A human body lay beneath it. I was ready to see anything, a skeleton, a mummy, the remains of clothing. But what I saw made me recoil and drop the lantern. I myself was lying on the bed. My face, only thin, sunken. Dry lips, skin pale as wax. Eyes closed. Hands folded on the chest, as if in a coffin. I could hear the blood pounding in my temples. For a few seconds I just stood there, unable to move. And then the body opened its eyes. They were empty. White, without pupils. But it was looking straight at me. "You never left?" it said in my voice. I took a step back. There was only a wall behind me. The knife fell from my hands. I could hear everything in my head buzzing, sounds mixing into a chaotic ringing. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't obey. "You thought you were alive," it continued. "But you've always been here. Since the very day you walked into this house." "No," I breathed out. "No. Remember." I closed my eyes. And in the darkness, behind the eyelids of fear and temptation to forget, a memory surfaced. That evening when I arrived there. The broker, the house, the first creak of the floor. I was walking down the hallway and suddenly felt a sharp pain in my chest. My heart. I fell. I fell and never got up. I realized all this was later. An illusion. A shadow of consciousness that remained within these walls. I was the same old man who was found dead in the bedroom. I opened my eyes. The body on the bed was closing its empty white eyes again. The whisper in my head became louder, shimmering with thousands of voices. Stay. You won't leave. You are part of us. I wanted to resist, I wanted to scream. But something inside me snapped. The neon, the world became dim, like an the old house film. Stood empty. The footsteps the and voices had crumbled even more. Me. The glass was broken. Familiar. The flowers had caved the last several places. And the neighbor said that after the on at the last moment, no one had dared to closing my eyes, but sooner or later, no one will see the silhouette in the cell anymore. Because now name was Anton. The shadow behind the who loved everything old, furniture, horses, legends. When he found an ID for sale, he decided, this is fate. The price was ridiculous. Only 100,000 rubles for the whole house. It needed major repairs, but at least there was privacy and space. When he arrived there, having looked at the broken windows for the first time, he decided that he would take it anyway. That all these tales about the memory of the walls were nonsense. He signed the documents and that same evening moved in with tools and a sleeping bag. In the evening, he sat on the floor, drawing a plan for the reconstruction. He imagined how our guests would live here, music would play, a fireplace would burn. The house seemed tired, but not hostile. Until he heard the first sound. Whisper. It appeared as if someone was speaking carefully into Uchlia's ear. The voice was so quiet that it could be mistaken for Uchlia's own thoughts. You won't leave. Anton raised Uchlia's head. It was night outside. Silence. He turned on the flashlight, walked round the rooms. No one. Returning, he sat down. Uchlia's heart was beating faster. How many times had he heard that the walls whisper in old houses? He grinned and buried Uchlia's face in Uchlia's tablet again. But the whisper was repeated. This time it was a little louder. Who's there? He asked out loud, seeming stupid to himself. There was no answer. Only a faint rumble, like the distant roar of the surf. Anton tried to fall asleep, but he lay there until morning, listening. The hum grew louder with each passing hour. He began to think that it was old pipes, and promised himself to deal with them the next day. But in the morning, while cleaning up the trash under the stairs, he came across something heavy. Under a layer of dust lay a camera. Old, covered in plastic, covered in stains. He pulled it out, brushed off the dirt and saw a note stuck to it. Watch the recording if you don't believe me. There was no signature. Anton took the camera to the kitchen. Featured the LED from a power bank, turned on viewing. The screen flickered and displayed a list of files. The recording was simply called 01. He pressed play. Part 7. Recording. The frame showed the same room. Bare walls, old furniture. Emptiness. The minutes passed. The noise of the microphone, silence, darkness. And 10 a.m. It began gradually, like the roar of a distant engine. Anton felt Uchlia's stomach go cold. This hum was the same sound he had heard last night. A silhouette appeared on the screen. Tall, with blurry edges, like a cloud of smoke. He stood facing the wall and stroked it with Uchlia's palms. Then he leaned closer, as if listening. Anton told tir whiches ace roy. Something in this movement was terrifying their life. The silhouette raised its head and turned straight into the camera. A face flashed across the frame. Vague, distorted, but human. Anton involuntarily stepped back. This face seemed to be looking at him through the lens. Then the silhouette tilted its head to the side and, moving its lips, whispered. "You're here. I know. Open up." The recording ended. Anton stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding the camera in Which's hands. The home was still ringing in Which's ears. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but he knew it wasn't Which's imagination. And at that moment he decided he had to find out the truth. Part 8. The doorway. The old masonry behind the closet was easy to find. The cricket plaster still showed traces of a door that had once been walled up. Anton knocked. The wall responded with a dull ringing. "If you're really here," he muttered, "then show me." Silence. He began to take apart the bricks. Each removed stone was like a step into the past. A chill blew through the cracks. Again, as the neighbors said, Letty smelled of rotten earth and something cold. When the opening was wide enough, he looked inside. And he saw a room. A bed. A grey bedspread. Dusty walls. He took a step inside. At that moment the home grew louder. It seemed that the entire space was filled with vibration, from which the walls shook. Anton covered Which's ears, trying to cope with panic. "Who are you?" he shouted. The home died down. And the room became so quiet that he could hear Which's own breathing. He slowly approached the bed and pulled the edge of the bedspread. There was no body underneath. Only an inscription made from old newspapers. "You're Knox." Anton dropped the bedspread in shock. And then something touched Which's shoulder. A cold hint. He turned round, and for the first time saw Forka completely. A figure in a long shadow. A face in which human features were barely visible. White, empty eyes. A slightly open mouth. "You came," she whispered. Anton backed away. Which's heart was pounding. Which's breath caught in Which's throat. "Who are you?" The shadow tilted its head to the side. I am the one who waited. The one who stayed. You will be the same." "No," he muttered. But the voice was already inside Which's head. "You have always been here." He took the last step back, wanted to run out of the room, but Which's legs did not obey. The space suddenly became viscous, like honey. Everything around was blurring. At the last moment, he heard a whisper right next to Which's ear. "You will not live."